Michael Kaskey Blomain, CBS Sports, covers the Sixers. He joins us now on the Boardwalk Honda Hotline. How did we get here, MKB? We are back to, first-round exits, apathy for the Sixers. I get it. Ben Simmons isn't playing, and that's a big problem. But, man, the warts are really showing with him out.
Yeah, absolutely, Mike. And I think last offseason is going to end up going down as a, really bad one in Sixers history in terms of, them handing out not one but two contracts that just at the time didn't look great and just have not looked any better. At this point a year later, when you're missing an all-star player like Ben Simmons and you have two other basically guys, you expect them to be able to, step up in the absence and do things, and instead you get Al Horford, who had 6 points, and Tobias Harris, who had 15. They were a combined negative 20 during their time on the court, and that's just not going to get it done for the Sixers.
Yeah, I mean, right now you look at Alec Burks getting major minutes, and they need him to get major minutes. I mean, to me, that just screams, Shake Milton over his head right now. That just screams mediocre. I mean, really, you got Joel Embiid and then mediocrity around him.
Yeah, absolutely. You're, asking three players that didn't even really factor in the team's plans at the beginning of the season in Alec Burks, Shake Milton, and Matisse Thybulle, who, obviously they were going to use him, but they really need him to have a great series now if they want to have any chance against the Celtics. And like you said, the fact that they're relying on those three guys and not all the other pieces that they were supposed to put into place around Ben and Joel is an indictment, certainly on the front office.
So let's get into last night a little bit. Joel Embiid, only 15 shot attempts late in the fourth quarter. He wasn't on the block. He wasn't getting many touches in those fourth quarter. Instead, Tobias Harris with some ugly-looking shots. What were your overall thoughts with how that fourth quarter went with Joel Embiid?
Yeah, obviously, Joel needs the ball more in clutch situations as the team's best player. It's I guess, inexcusable, for lack of a better word, on both ends that, he didn't get it more down the stretch. I think, some of it falls onto him, which he acknowledged after the game in his press conference when he said he needs to be more assertive and more demanding on offense. I think there were definitely times where, he could have, made the extra effort to make himself more available to receive an entry pass in certain situations. But ultimately, it falls on his teammates, to get him the ball in situations and know that that's where their bread is going to be buttered in this series if they're going to have success. And then obviously the other part of it falls on Brett Brown to, get Joel the ball in situations where he can succeed.
Michael Kaskey Blomain covers the Sixers, and of course they're down 1-0. Joel said today or after the loss, I've got to do more. As we just kind of mentioned, he does need to do more, but what will the team around him look like? What did Brett say today? I mean, what changes are potentially on the table to help Joel out here?
I think a change that they probably should have made this going into the series, and one that obviously Brett tried to make throughout the season, but injury issues and things prevented him from doing it, is moving Al Horford to the bench and sliding in one of either two players, most likely Matisse into that starting spot, who spend more time. He had the most success out of any Sixer yesterday in terms of guarding Jason Tatum. His defensive prowess has been on display throughout the season, so either him or Alec Burks, moving one of those two guys into that starting lineup to have more able guys around Joel, and then let Al run the center spot in the second unit. It's really the only move that makes sense. Today, Brett talked to us about an hour ago, and he said that basically anything's on the table at this point. He didn't give any sort of input in terms of what he might do, but he seemed open to the idea. And now with the Gordon Hayward injury to the Celtics, him being out for the rest of the series, I think that even opens things up more for the Sixers to potentially, try to switch things up and take advantage of their depth.
That's exactly what I was going to bring up, that depth. If they slide someone like Marcus Smart into the lineup, what do they really have to work with when it comes to that bench? I mean, you can play the starters a lot more, but you could see the difference when Jason Tatum went out, let's say, and that Sixers team went on that 13-0 run, which bled into the fourth quarter a little bit. I think it actually went into a 15-0 run. But do you think that that's enough for the Sixers to be able to have a chance to attack that depth?
Yeah, absolutely, Brody. I think it opens up a window for them, certainly. The Celtics, they're a top-heavy team, super talented first five, But like you said now, especially if you're taking Marcus Smart, who's their best bench player, putting him into that starting lineup, you really don't have a lot coming off the bench, where the Sixers, they don't have a ton coming off the bench either, but they have a little bit more depth, especially, if you say you move Al to that second unit and you bring in Al Horford and Alec Burks coming in off the bench along with, the shooting of Furkan Korkmaz, that's more than the Celtics have. And at this point, that's probably the biggest advantage that the Sixers have over the Celtics in the series is that depth. So I would look for Brett to try to, maximize that in terms of, getting the rotations and figuring out maybe that Al would be better in that second unit, and then using him as a point of attack to really try to take advantage of that.
Yeah, I know the news about Hayward is, we kind of touched on it there, but is that a series changer? I mean, are the Sixers now in position that they can win this series because Gordon Hayward is out, and that really shortens this already limited Boston bench?
I think it opens the door. Obviously, Hayward's kind of like the fourth fiddle on that team, and so much of it's still going to, they still have Tatum and Brown and obviously Kemba Walker, who didn't have he had a relatively quiet game in game one, but he's capable of going off on any given night for 40 also. So they're still extremely dangerous, but like we were just saying, I think the fact that, it hits their depth, which they was already kind of a bad spot for that team. I think it really does open the window for the Sixers to take advantage of it. It would have been, better if they had that going into game one. Gordon Hayward played, over 30 minutes last night. He had a real solid performance for them. He just does, a lot of the little things for them offensively. So I do think that they'll miss him. Ultimately, I don't think it's necessarily enough to shift the series in the Sixers' favor, but it does give them an advantage that if they're able to take advantage of it, could help them out.
Go ahead, Bros.
Is there a positive way to look at this? If the Sixers had 18 turnovers leading to 21 Boston Celtics points, allowing 16 offensive boards and not going to Joel Embiid enough late, if they were to fix those issues, could you say, hey, the Sixers have a chance? It's just the fact that it was so close with all of those issues, you can maybe look at it positively and say, well, if they fix that, maybe they can actually win.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's at least the way Brett Brown is looking at it based off, what he said to us last night. Because there are some areas you would expect or at least hope that moving forward you get more than 21 points combined from, Tobias and Al Horford. They're going to need those guys to step up, and they're capable of that. Joel with only 15 shots. You'd like to see that get up to at least, 20, 22, 24 attempts, coupled with his 12 free throws. And then, like you said, if they're able to cut down on the turnovers, Tobias Harris said today he thought a lot of the turnovers were kind of just the result of typical playoff jitters, like they were trying to play a little bit faster, and they were getting a little bit ahead of themselves due to the nerves. And he said he pointed to the fact that they, cut them down heavily in the second half. A lot of those turnovers were in the first quarter, first half. And he said once they settled down, they felt a little bit more comfortable. So if they can, parlay that into the second game and trim those turnovers down, they should be right there again with the opportunity. And if they can get Joel the ball down the stretch a little bit more, they should put themselves in an opportunity to win at least.
Now, I know asking this doesn't make the difference between them winning a championship or not. I mean, how much is losing Glenn Robinson III affecting them in this series?
It's tough to say, Mike, just because he was out for so much of this seeding slate where I thought Brett was going to, iron out the rotation. And before the season was suspended, Glenn really didn't have, a huge role with the team either. Before, he played, I think a handful of games before the season was suspended. So he's a really talented player, and I do think he could help the Sixers if he comes back. But it's tough to put a number on it. I just don't think, with the other players at that position too, I don't know how much he would have played over them. Alec Burks really kind of, distinguished himself during the seeding slate as a guy that can create for himself. Matisse was going to get minutes due to the defense. So maybe, some of the minutes that Korkmaz is seeing could potentially go to GR3 if he's back and healthy. But like you said, probably not enough to, make a noticeable difference at this point.
So when you look back at game one, missed opportunity, Boston's better.
It's a combination of both. I do think Boston is a better constructed team, at this point in time. But I do think the Sixers, they're a deeper team, and they, like you said, it was a missed opportunity in terms of the turnovers and the fact that they didn't capitalize on getting Joel the ball. I mean, there's no one on that Boston team that can come close to guarding Joel in post. And I think if they really, focus on that and do a better job of getting him, in position where he can take advantage of his size in the post, I think they'll put themselves in a really good position to win.
By the way, would Markelle Fultz be the best guard the Sixers have?
The best guard, probably not, just because still it would be clunky. He's still not. He's obviously looking a lot better, but he's still not comfortable shooting from the 3-point range, which is what they want around Joel. So for what they need right now, I think Alec Burks is actually doing a pretty fine job. But it is nice to see Markelle, like you guys were talking about in the lead, and hitting some jumpers here in this game against the Bucks.
Yeah, 14 minutes. He's 5 of 6, 1 of 2 from 3. He's got 11 points. They just don't have a guy. Again, they have no shot creator. They have no one that can dribble drive, no one that can put the ball on the floor, no one that can get to the basket and create. I mean, over all this time, they still cannot get a guy to put, and you're watching the games yesterday, Murray, who are they playing? Utah is Mitchell. These guys are going back and forth and back and forth. The Sixers can't keep up. They got nobody who can do anything like that. Not that Fultz can. I'm just saying they got no shot creators, nobody who can individually get their own shot.
And it seems like we've been saying that for several years now, Mike, that they just don't have a perimeter guy that you can just give the ball to and get his own shot. They had Jimmy half a season, but even he is not quite as dynamic as some of these young guards we're talking about. And ironically enough, like Fultz was supposed to be that guy. The Sixers knew they needed, a third guy like that. Obviously, this didn't work out for him in Philadelphia, but it is tough watching, all of these other playoff series and seeing how easily offense can be initiated with a high screen to a dynamic guard that's capable of, pulling up or driving like Dame or, Jamal Murray, Donovan Mitchell, any of these guys. If this just had anything, even like a Kemba Walker, it would open their offense up tremendously.
You're a gentleman and a scholar, Michael Kaskey Blomain. Appreciate it, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, man. Always a pleasure.
At the Real Mike KB. And he covers the Sixers for CBS Sports nationally. Of course, you used to read him on 97.3 ESPN.com. And he, like all guests, appeared to be the Boardwalk Honda hotline.